The Murder House, the story of Richard Speck. On the morning of July 15, 1966, the people of Chicago woke up to the shocking news that 8 student nurses had been brutally murdered in their dormitory just hours before. As the police moved the corpses out of the dormitory, the million-dollar question was, who would do such a thing? Gradually, the gruesome details of this mass murder became clear. The blood-stained dormitory revealed the sadistic way in which the killer had disposed of these young women. The women had been either strangled or stabbed to death, as there was blood everywhere. Apparently, a man armed with a knife and a pistol had broken into the dormitory late into the night and forcefully led 6 women into one of the rooms and tied them up. 3 more nurses who had been out arrived later, and he did the same to them. The only surviving nurse, who hid under the bed, gave the police a description of the assailant, and the police promised a reward for whoever had information that could lead to his arrest. 2 days after the brutal killings, the police arrested a man who fit the description of the killer while he was getting treated in a hospital. His name was Richard Speck, a young man of 24 years of age. Who was this man? How did he murder them? And what was the motive behind the murders? Richard Benjamin Speck was born in the small village of Kirkwood, Illinois in 1941. He was the 7th of 8 children born to 2 Christian, teetotaling parents. Shortly after his birth, the family decided to move to Monmouth, Illinois, which was just a 10-minute drive from Kirkwood. His parents moved there to look for better opportunities that a small village probably couldn't offer. His dad, Benjamin Franklin Speck, secured a job as a packer at Western Stoneware in Monmouth, having previously been a farmer and a logger while in Kirkwood. Things were now looking bright for this young family. However, something unprecedented happened. Richard Speck's father suffered a heart attack and died at the age of 53. His father's death really hurt him, as he was very close to his dad. 3 years later, his mother, Mary Speck, married Carl August Rudolph Lindbergh in Texas. She met Lindbergh while on a train ride to Chicago. However, Lindbergh was the exact opposite of Richard's father. He had a 25-year criminal record and was also a hard drinker. Speck waited behind with his married sister in Monmouth to finish his 2nd grade before joining his mother in Santo, Texas. Speck moved with his sister Carolyn, his mother, and his stepfather to East Dallas. They moved regularly, living in some of the poorest neighborhoods of the city over the next 12 years. His stepfather was a chronic drunk and verbally abused Speck often. Speck had his struggles with school, which was made worse by his refusal to wear the glasses he needed for reading. His performances never improved, and this was in part because of his fear of people staring at him and his refusal to speak in class. He repeated 8th grade and would fail every subject in the first semester of 9th grade, which led him to quitting school just after he turned 16. By this time, Speck had picked up his stepfather's excessive drinking habit, and he was getting drunk every other day. He was first arrested at the age of 13, followed by many more arrests over the course of the next 8 years. By the time he was 18, he got a job as a laborer for the 7-Up bottling company in Dallas. It was here that he met 15-year-old Shirley Malone during the Texas State Fair. She got pregnant for him after just 3 weeks of dating. Speck married her in January of the next year, and he and his wife moved in with his sister Carolyn and her husband. Speck's mother, who had just divorced her alcoholic husband, also lived with Carolyn at the time. Speck stopped going by the name Richard Lindbergh, instead reverting to his original name Richard Speck after marriage. His daughter was born in July of 1962, and at this time, Speck, as usual, had caused trouble and was spending some time in one of his most frequented places, jail, where he was serving a 22-day sentence for disturbing the peace after he was involved in a drunken brawl in McKinney, Texas. At the age of 21, Speck was found guilty of forgery and burglary in July 1963 and given a 3-year prison sentence. Speck had stolen a grocery shop for cigarettes, alcohol, and $3 in cash, while also forging and cashing a co-worker's $44 paycheck. After completing a 16-month sentence at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas, he was granted parole in 1965. His release lasted 1 week. On January 9, 1965, Speck was taken into custody once more. With a 17-inch carving knife in hand, Speck attacked a woman in her apartment complex parking lot before fleeing when she yelled. He was arrested by the police a few blocks away from the scene. He was convicted and given a 16-month sentence, but he spent only 6 months due to an error. Following his release, Speck worked as a driver for the Patterson Meat Company for 3 months. Despite having 6 accidents in the corporate truck, he was fired for not reporting for duty. On his mother's advice, Speck moved in with a 29-year-old divorcee who was a former professional wrestler and was currently a bartender at his favorite establishment, Ginny's Lounge, in December 1965 to watch her 3 kids. Malone, who had been living apart from Speck, filed for divorce in January 1966. At Ginny's Lounge, Speck stabbed a man during a knife fight that same month. He was accused of aggravated assault, but his mother hired a defense attorney who was able to have the case dropped to disturbing the peace. This was the last time he spent time in police custody. On March 5, 1966, Speck purchased a 12-year-old car. The next evening, he committed a robbery at a grocery shop, taking 70 cartons of cigarettes, which he later sold out of the trunk of his car in the parking lot of the grocery store. On March 8th, a warrant for Speck's arrest for burglary was issued after the police located the car he had abandoned. It would have been his 42nd arrest in Dallas, and another prison sentence was very certain if he had been taken into custody according to that warrant. Speck was driven to the Dallas bus station by his sister Carolyn on March 9, 1966, where he boarded a bus bound for Chicago, Illinois. After spending a few days in Chicago with his sister Martha Thornton and her family, Speck went back to his boyhood home of Monmouth, Illinois, to stay for a while. When Speck found that his ex-wife had married again just 2 days after being awarded a divorce on March 16, 1966, he became upset. On March 25th, he relocated to the Christie Hotel in the heart of Monmouth, where he spent the majority of his time in taverns. Mrs. Vigil Harris, a 65-year-old resident of Monmouth, came home at 1 in the morning on April 3rd to discover a thief in her home wielding a knife. He was wielding a knife. He was a 6-foot-tall white male who talked quite softly with a southern drawl and was extremely nice. She was blindfolded, bound, and sexually assaulted by the man. He also ransacked her house and took the $2.50 she had made that evening babysitting. A week later, on April 9th at 12:20 a.m., Mary Catherine Pierce, 32, a bartender at her brother-in-law's tavern in downtown Monmouth, called Frank's Place, was last seen leaving. Her body was discovered on April 13th in an abandoned hog house behind the tavern, after she had been reported missing on April 12th. She had been struck in the abdomen, rupturing her liver, and died as a result. The police questioned Speck while investigating the murder because he used to visit the tavern regularly. Although the police asked him to wait to assist with the investigation, he skipped town a few days later, indicating that he might be connected to Mary's death. Speck moved back to Chicago to stay with his sister, and this was where he was going to commit perhaps the greatest crime of the time. Speck had already started displaying a violent behavior, as was evident in his many tavern fights. He was always frustrated and drunk. On getting to Chicago, his sister's husband tried to find work for him in the U.S. Merchant Maritime. He got work immediately with the Clarence B. Randall. However, he was sick on his first voyage and had to be taken to the hospital by U.S. Coast Guard helicopter, where he had an emergency appendectomy. He came back to join the crew in May, but he would last only a month as he ended up in a fight with one of the boat's officers while he was drunk. After he was dismissed, his brother-in-law again took him to find work, this time in the National Maritime Union. However, he failed to secure a job. By Monday, July 11th, he had outstayed his welcome, and again he attempted to get a job on a ship with the NMU. This was when one of the worst massacres Chicago had ever seen would be committed. Speck went to the NMU hiring hall again with high hopes, and even got a job on Sinclair Oil's tanker SS Sinclair Great Lakes. When he arrived there, he discovered that there was no vacancy, and a seemingly frustrated Speck returned to the NMU hiring hall, which had closed by that time. The day of the murder. The next day, Wednesday, July 13, Speck's sister and her husband came to visit him at around 9 a.m., and they talked for 30 minutes. Speck was still annoyed from the previous day's disappointment. After waiting till 10:30 a.m., he left the hiring hall and walked about 1.5 miles to check in at the Shipyard Inn. Speck was frustrated at this point. He had been going to the hiring hall for 3 days and still didn't get a job. So he did what he usually did when he was frustrated. He spent the rest of his day drinking in nearby taverns. At the end of his drinking spree, the now drunk Speck stopped a 53-year-old Ella Mae Hooper and threatened to stab her with a knife if she didn't comply. He led her to his room at the Shipyard Inn, where he raped her and stole her black .22 caliber Rome pistol. He then left completely in black, carrying Ella Mae Hooper's pistol and a switchblade. He went to the Shipyard Inn's tavern to drink until 10:20 p.m. When he finished getting more drunk, he left the tavern for the nurse's townhouse about 1.5 miles away. Speck broke into a townhouse through the window in a nearby neighborhood, which was functioning as a dormitory for student nurses. He knocked on the door of Filipina exchange student Corazon Amoreo, 23, and with a gun, he led her and other exchange students from the Philippines, Merlita Gargulo, 23, and Valentina Pasion, 23, into the next room, where 3 American students, Patricia Matusek, 20, Pamela Wilkening, 20, and Nina Jo Schmeil, 24, were sleeping. He then woke them up and tied all the 6 girls with strips of torn bedsheets. Amoreo, the lone survivor, said that they should be calm to keep their assailant calm. Instead, he led them out one by one and either stabbed or strangled each woman to death. In the midst of this madness, 3 other nurses arrived home. Suzanne Ferris, 21, who arrived first, was stabbed to death in the hallway upstairs as she was going to her bedroom. Marianne Jordan, 20, who came next, was also stabbed to death as she entered the dormitory. The last nurse to arrive, Gloria Jean Davy, 22, who was dropped by her boyfriend, was raped by Speck and then strangled to death. Due to the late arrivals, Speck must have lost count of the people in the room, which gave Corazon Amoreo the opportunity to slip under the bed. She stayed until 6 a.m., hours after his rampage. Speck was arrested 2 days later after a phone call from a doctor at Cook County Hospital who recognized his Born to Raise Hell tattoo. He was arrested by the police and stood trial for 8 counts of murder and was sentenced to die in the electric chair. In a dramatic event in court, Corazon Amoreo stepped out of the witness box and pointed at him that he was definitely the killer. However, his sentence was changed to 8 consecutive life imprisonment terms. The victims of Richard Speck were all young nurses who had a bright future ahead of them. However, on the night of July 14, 1996, their lives were ended when a stranger showed up at their dormitory and savagely murdered each one of them for the sake of some demented personal pleasure. So there you have it. Do you think Speck would have grown up differently as a man if it wasn't for his stepdad's influence? Or do you think it was within him to be the person he turned out to be, a horrific murderer? Let us know in the comments below if you found this video fascinating. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories. Thanks for watching, and see you soon in the next video.